first, live, local. This is Fox 12 Now.
And hello, everyone. This is Fox 12 Now. I'm Greg Nibbler. Thank you, as always, for joining us. That is our live shot there of downtown Portland from the Shriners Cam, and it is nice outside. It's really nice right now. It is going to get really hot over the next few days. Starting on Thursday, it's going to get into the 90s. Saturday, Sunday, Monday, 100 and maybe 100 plus going into those days. So definitely a heat wave on the way. Again, this is Fox 12 Now. We live stream here every weekday starting at 1 p.m. Pacific and going throughout the afternoon, covering a wide range of topics. But yes, that is what we're talking about today, that impending weather. And earlier today, we were talking about how to take care of your pets during that. Now we're going to talk about taking care of your plants, because it is something that, you know, a lot of people work really hard on their gardens or cultivating something really amazing, and this heat could have an effect on it, and that's what we're going to talk about right now. To do so, we have an expert joining us. We have Deby Barnhart, the president of Cornell Farms. And Deby, thank you for being here with us to talk about this. Number one, I said this off air, but I love the background that you have right there. It looks amazing in there, and I'm going to guess you know how to take care of plants. So thanks for joining us with your expert advice. So I think the first thing I want to ask is, you know, with this weather getting hotter like this, what are some of the main things that people should consider with it when it comes to their gardens or their plants?
Well, definitely, it seems obvious, but watering, you think you might have watered enough, but you probably won't have watered enough for what's the temperatures that are coming. If you can deeply water, like, you know, I don't know if it's a sprinkler or if it's a drip system, just put it on 3 times as long as it was before in the early morning. And once we hit the hundreds, you should do it twice a day. Anything in a container, like on your back patio, you absolutely want to water that twice a day in the hundreds.
So twice a day, and you mentioned early morning. Are there specific times where it's better to do your watering than others?
Well, in the cool of the day. So, you know, before 10 o'clock, I mean, the earlier, the better. It's just going to really hydrate the roots much better. And it's not about sprinkling. It's about deep watering. So that's why the length of the watering is important. So like if you have a container that's, you know, this big, you want to think about pouring that much water on the plant in this kind of heat.
So taking like the circumference of that and putting that much water on there, or the depth?
Yes, I mean, really large pots, they should actually stay more hydrated because they have a lot more soil around them. But the smaller the pot, the more frequent you need to water, and then you should see water dripping out the bottom. Then you know for sure that you have actually watered it. All the roots.
And doing that 3 times a day. So in the early morning, if you can, and I assume probably the early evening would be another good time. Just you want to miss that.
I mean, twice a day would be great.
Yeah.
Should be good. The other thing is, if you have plants that you could possibly even move to a shadier location in this kind of heat, for instance, if you have a hydrangea in a container, I would absolutely get it out of any amount of sun that you can, because no matter how much water you put on a hydrangea, if you just have kept the hose on it the entire day, it would still go droop from heat. And that's just one thing that hydrangeas in particular do.
And what's the temperature where? What's the highest temperature, or the lowest temperature rather, when we're talking about this heat wave, that you need to start being concerned with that kind of stuff?
I'd say anything over 90.
Okay, anything over 90, yeah, and it sounds like we're gonna have a few days of that. So if you can, then get them out of the sun altogether. Now, are there specific plants, you mentioned hydrangea, are there other specific plants that people should really be aware of when it comes to their gardens? Something that they can't move out of the sun, but maybe they can try to mitigate some of these issues?
Well, I've seen people put umbrellas over things that they've noticed that have burned in the past. If the foliage has burned from too much intensity, you could just lay some potentially frost cloth over the top, just to mitigate the direct rays on the leaf. But really, probably the most important thing would be really deep watering.
So taking care of that deep water. And what are some other side effects? You know, if you can make sure they get the water in there, but you mentioned drooping. So what are some of the other side effects that you can see with your plants if they are getting too much sun?
So besides drooping, which, by the way, drooping can also happen from too much water, not to be confusing. But if the soil feels dry and it's drooping, except if it's a hydrangea, then it needs more water. But the other thing that you might notice is a normally green, deep green leaf might look a little scorched, like brighter yellow on it. That would definitely indicate it's getting too much sun and possibly not enough water. It's that happens just in ordinary temperatures. If something isn't getting enough water, you could have scorched leaves, but in extreme temperatures, it could just mean it needs more shade.
What's the most common thing that you hear from people after something like this, something like a heat wave, when they come in and talk about what's going on with their plants?
Well, usually, unless it's a perennial, they're going to throw it out and get something different.
Yeah, it's that bad. Yeah, I've experienced that myself, so I'm one of those people. But
what you could do is you could cut the plant back after the heat wave and let it re-emerge, because it will grow back.
Okay, so I think that's a good point here to talk about this. So say you do have a plant that you leave out, you get a little bit of that sun damage, you see some of those leaves are turning yellow or look singed. Are there things that you can do to save that plant?
Yes, it might be anything from just cut the leaf off or cut the branch off to, potentially cut the whole plant back, depending on what it is. That would be easier for perennials and annuals. I wouldn't do that necessarily with a shrub, but it should be okay in the end.
So you could have
it just
may have a chance to save it.
Yes, exactly.
Are there specific kinds of plants that people won't have to worry about when it comes to this heat?
Well, I think it has to do with watering. Even our big, huge trees, I mean, they've been noticing over time that the Douglas fir trees, for instance, that we've never thought about watering those. And yet, because of our increasing temperatures, they do need more hydration now. And so we need to start paying attention to making sure we're watering some of the things that maybe we've never thought too much about watering. Evergreens, for instance, especially conifers, not to overwater, but in the heat, I'm not sure you could overwater.
Wow. What I'm getting here is watering is very, very important. To go through that again, just for somebody who's got a potted plant, how do you know whether you've given it enough water or too much water?
So what I do is I start watering, and I'm always going around the entire soil. I'm not just watering in one spot. And I'm waiting to see the first signs of water dripping out the bottom of the pot, and then I stop watering.
So that's the point where you know that you've got enough in there, once you see it coming out of the bottom.
Because you want the roots to go all the way to the bottom of the pot. If you're always watering very shallowly and water doesn't drip out the bottom, then your roots are going to be a lot more susceptible to the heat extremes as well as cold extremes. So watering till water comes out the bottom is always a good practice.
Great to know. Okay, so you definitely want to see that. You want to do it a couple of times a day at least, in the early morning, maybe the evening.
Over 90. Yes.
Yeah, when it's cool, when it's over 90. Any other advice that you have for people just to prepare for something like this ahead of time?
Well, especially for your shrubs, if you can start watering ahead of time, like a few days ahead where you've really got your soil very hydrated, it's going to be less of an impact. There will come the time, though, when we're over 100, where plants simply cannot take up the moisture fast enough for the amount of heat that is coming on them in the sunlight. They just can't take it up fast enough, and that is the moment where you're going to see burn happening on the foliage.
And you mentioned to notice burn, it's like the leaves turning yellow. What are those signs of knowing that a plant is burning?
So it could be, if it's a leaf, that it's kind of turning yellow. If it's a conifer with needles, the needles can change color to kind of an off color, or potentially even turning yellow.
Anything specific that people should do if they have fruit trees or fruit along anything along those lines during this heat wave?
Basically water. There's not much else that you would need to do, just making sure that they're well watered.
So it's water, water, water.
Yeah.
That is the biggest thing,
Yes.
yeah, that people can be doing. All right, I have one other question, and this has to do with, you have so many amazing plants I can see just behind you. Is there any one kind of plant that someone could buy and say, leave out on a porch all year long here in Oregon, going through ice and going through heat, that would survive?
You mean in a normal year?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I guess whatever normal is now.
I don't want to count January for anything, but lots of plants should be fine. Trees and shrubs that are hardy to zone 7 in particular. We're USDA zone 8 now, and 7 is just a little bit more cold hardy plant. So, and if you're on the top of the hills, you better be going for zone 6 plants. But I would say lots of shrubs and conifers do very well in containers, generally.
Generally
Year to year.
speaking. So you
Yes.
minus maybe some real extremes, that's something you should be okay with. So, okay, good to know. Anything else that you think people should be aware of about this heat wave?
Well, don't forget to hydrate yourself. Don't stay out there for 6 hours in 100-degree temperatures trying to water your garden. Do that in the morning and do that at night.
Fantastic. Deby, thank you so much for joining us to talk about all this. Really appreciate your time and knowledge there out at Cornell Farms. And yeah, thanks for being here.
All right. Thank you for asking. And
Yeah, thank
stay
you.
cool.
You too. All right, and thank you to everybody too for joining us here for this segment. Really appreciate it. We're talking about this impending heat wave, and as I mentioned, we've got all the details at kptv.com. You can follow along there for the weather and to be aware of what's coming with this and how to take care of your plants. We also did a segment about how to take care of your pets, so that was earlier today. You can check all of that out at kptv.com. Just click on the Fox 12 Now tab or download